In a dimly lit restaurant, my cheating wife and her lover shared a romantic dinner unaware of the impending change. As she opened the envelope containing the divorce letter, her eyes gleamed with what once belonged to me. Her attire spoke volumes of her self-assurance, yet the world around them remained oblivious to the tumultuous turn their lives were about to take. The man before her chuckled conspiratorially, seemingly convinced that he was now privy to her innermost secrets. I stood afar, knowing where they sat, their preferred dishes, the wine he'd ordered to win her favor, and even the scent of perfume she'd chosen for our anniversary years ago. Every aspect of the tableau was etched into my memory, but this time it was no longer about us. The situation wasn't about us. I no longer gave thought to her feelings or his thoughts. What mattered was the letter, the paper that would finalize an act I had endured for too long as a facade. The waiter put the envelope on the table with a subtle smile, and she, without delay, grabbed it as if expecting a precious present. His muffled laughter echoed as his fingers brushed the edge of the paper. She assumed it was a surprise from him, a romantic gesture, something to uphold her self-created illusion. However, as she read, her expression altered, her face started to pale, her lips parted in a silent sigh. The confidence in her eyes shattered. I wanted her to feel, even for a moment, the same agony that had tormented me for months. That look of disbelief, of despair, marked the start of my plan. He watched her, bewildered, unable to comprehend the shift in mood. He inquired, attempting to grasp her hand over the table. She remained silent, frozen, as if time itself had ceased around her. She recognized she had been exposed, that the charade was at an end. The facade he donned, his double existence, it was all disintegrating before him. I recall the initial instance of suspicion. It was a message, straightforward, too innocent to trigger immediate wariness. Yet, an instinct warned me there was more hidden. Weeks of doubt, sleepless nights, scouring the crevices of our lives for hints. I refused to accept it. I couldn't fathom that the woman who had shared countless years of laughter, secrets, and dreams with me was betraying me. It felt as though every word of affection, every loving gesture, was merely a skillfully woven deception. Only when the evidence became irrefutable did I realize the truth. Photos, messages, secret rendezvous. She had been living a secret life, and I, blind to reality, persisted in thinking everything was normal. From then on, I opted to cease being a victim. She wouldn't savor the act of gradually ruining me. Instead, I was the one who would bring about an end at my own pace. I bided my time for the optimal opportunity when she believed herself in control. Dinner with him marked the climax of her directed film, but I would pen its final moments. Each word in that letter was meticulously selected. There were no insults or overt accusations, only raw truth, as sharp as a knife's cold blade, cutting silently yet deeply. As she read, I experienced an unexpected sense of liberation, like breaking free from an emotional cell. It wasn't revenge, it was a more profound act, a release. She now understood that I was aware, that the game had ended, and from that moment forward, she could no longer deceive me. There would be no more lies, no more weak excuses, no more unexplained absences justified by sudden meetings. The burden of treachery, suffocating me for so long, now fell on her. He was struggling to comprehend the situation. What does it say? What did he send? His inquiry sliced through the quietness like a blade. She couldn't respond. Words were starting to materialize in her eyes, but they wouldn't emerge. He gazed at the torn envelope, at her trembling hands, and understood that something catastrophic had transpired. "What's happening?" he demanded, now with a tinge of panic in his tone. She raised her gaze, but she was no longer the same. The self-assured smile vanished. In its place, there was nothing but emptiness, the realization that everything was lost. The waiter reappeared at the table, asking if they required anything else. However, there was nothing left to provide. Dinner had been disrupted by something far greater than either of them anticipated. They were ensnared in that instant, with no escape route. I turned and departed. I no longer needed to be there. Chaos had already commenced. A new sufferer now bore my old pain. She sat, once at our table in that restaurant, now a stage of her sorrow. Reversal was impossible. The choice was set. As I strolled down the street, an unfamiliar feeling emerged, one I hadn't felt for quite some time. However, there remained something I was yet to discover, something that would alter everything. For destiny always reserves one final maneuver. Welcome to our channel, where it's clear we oppose any form of betrayal. The tales you'll find here are fictional, yet with a strong message. Betrayal ruins lives, relationships, and hearts. Brace yourself for an immersive tale, filled with unexpected twists and turns, where the aftermath of infidelity is catastrophic. So, settle in and prepare yourself. The story you're about to hear will take your breath away. Enjoy your listening. The pair, John and Rachel, seemed ideal to all onlookers, residing in a quaint, antiquated colonial dwelling brimming with history. Their home projected stability, both architecturally and within their family life. Rachel, an accomplished lawyer, was esteemed for her impeccable morals and knack for solving intricate disputes. John, on the other hand, maintained a steady career as an entrepreneur, heading his own consultancy firm. Both were driven, yet they found space to foster a bond of affection and respect. Rachel's smile was effortless and captivating, drawing people in instantly. She commanded a room without uttering a word, her presence enchanting. Although her profession necessitated an unyielding demeanor, at home she exhibited a softness that made John feel cherished. In his eyes, he appeared to be the sole observer of her tender side. They were the admired couple, their relationship often perceived as unattainable, bordering on idyllic ideals. For John, marriage served as a sanctuary. After years of devotion to work and constructing a robust career, he cherished the comfort of returning home to someone who comprehended the burdens of his duties. Rachel was that person. They harbored long-term aspirations, travel fantasies, life ventures that involved mutual growth, broadening horizons, and potentially creating something substantial. Their discussions about the future always exuded optimism. When they pondered their retirement, they shared laughter, envisioning a seaside home where they could finally release themselves from the shackles of daily demands. On weekends, the couple enjoyed hosting friends for dinner. Merriment filled the dining hall as they swapped tales, savored premium wines, and relished the fellowship of other couples who appreciated them. In these instances, John experienced wholeness as though the world was specifically designed for his presence. Rachel, ever the gracious hostess, skillfully made everyone feel unique, and John, in his restrained manner, took pride in having such an enchanting companion. He saw in Rachel everything he had yearned for: beauty, wisdom, but most importantly, a robust partnership. However, in the past few weeks, something shifted. It was barely noticeable to outsiders, yet John sensed it. It wasn't due to anything Rachel did, but rather what she failed to do. The tiny acts, the ones he always cherished, such as her gentle hand squeeze during dinner or her hearty laughter at his evening jokes, were now missing. Rachel was growing distant, more guarded. John attempted to avoid dwelling too deeply on the matter, attributing it to his heavy workload and everyday pressures. Adulthood, he recognized, had its highs and lows, and he believed that, similar to any relationship, they were experiencing a challenging period. As time passed, John became increasingly attentive. He observed Rachel spending more hours outside under the guise of increased office responsibilities. Her phone, previously always in sight, was now concealed for longer durations, secured by passwords that had not existed before. He tried to justify it, convincing himself that his concerns were unfounded, that he was merely paranoid and overthinking. Rachel had always been discreet about her work affairs, and he had never felt compelled to probe. However, a quiet unease persisted within him. The nights she returned late, with seemingly valid excuses ready on her lips, no longer comforted him as they once did. Instead, they left him feeling hollow. A vague sense of mistrust gradually congealed within him, amplifying day by day. He found himself contrasting it with their early relationship stages, where things were distinctly different. Their gazes held a fiery intensity, they touched more often and craved constant togetherness. Now, it felt as if they lived separate existences. John pondered whether this was simply a byproduct of time in a long marriage, or if there were hidden factors contributing to the distance. Doubt seeped into him gradually, barely noticeable at first, but its presence grew more pronounced with each passing day. In contrast, Rachel appeared engrossed in her own realm. When John inquired about her day, she gave vague responses, avoiding detailed explanations, a behavior that was uncharacteristic of her. Previously, they shared everything openly, laughed together over minor, everyday hardships, and provided mutual support during tough choices. An unseen barrier divided them, one John couldn't penetrate. He pondered whether he should address the issue with her. Perhaps it was just a transient phase or their lives' hectic pace causing the disconnect. Yet, Rachel's evasion of specific subjects gave him concern. She was consistently engrossed, always occupied by some immediate obligation, always distant, giving the impression of other priorities. However, John decided to remain patient for now. He cherished her, perhaps overly so. They had a life constructed on mutual trust and harmony accumulated over years. It couldn't be something as grave as it seemed. Instead, he chose to perceive it as a phase, something transient, a temporary disturbance in the calm waters of their long-standing marriage. The echo of Rachel's laughter from upstairs pulled him back to reality. She was chatting on the phone, likely with a work associate. He overheard her discussing a dinner, possibly a significant gathering for a fresh case she was handling. He didn't dare interrupt, yet unease persisted, an unsettling sensation he could no longer dismiss entirely. Eventually, he would need to address this issue. In the interim, he clung to the belief that everything remained manageable. The ensuing days felt weighty and monotonous for John, much like a laborious mechanical rhythm. The unease that once lurked in the periphery of his suspicions now materialized, expanding with each quiet moment between him and Rachel. Her smile no longer soothed him. It held an emptiness and distance that once completed him. Yet, he maintained hope that perhaps he was overreacting, that this could merely be a complex phase in life that would swiftly pass. But life continued without their relationship returning to its usual state. John scrutinized Rachel more than ever before, seeking evidence to disprove his mounting doubts. Despite his desire to trust her, each action seemed to fuel his increasing apprehension. Her phone, once freely placed around the house, was now always tucked away in her pocket or bag. The messages she'd previously answered openly were now met with hurried apologies and swift departures to other rooms. One evening, while Rachel prepared for another business dinner, John felt compelled to act on his gut feelings. He observed as she got ready. The dress she selected was the same one worn on their wedding anniversary, yet it wasn't intended for him this time. She carefully donned it, her hair cascading in perfect waves, the scent of the perfume he loved wafting through the air. He remained silent, but the heaviness of that moment confirmed his deepest fears. Rachel smiled at him as she descended the stairs. She mentioned she might be delayed, yet left without a hint of worry that almost made John chuckle over his prior innocence. Responding with a nod, he observed her depart, each step through the door seeming a final goodbye. Upon closure, a knot swelled in his throat. He recognized the decision he must make, one not desired, but now compulsory. He trailed Rachel from a distance, bearing the burden of every kilometer he advanced towards the city heart. Oblivious to being followed, she drove unperturbed. To John, it was as if he were a captive audience in a well-orchestrated play. When her car halted before an upscale eatery, he parked at a distance, knuckles white on the wheel. He watched as she stepped out, smoothing her dress mechanically, then vanish inside the restaurant. John paused, contemplating a confrontation then and there, but decided against it. It wasn't the right moment. He wanted to confirm his suspicions, to be certain. As night stretched outside, John peered through the restaurant windows, spotting him the man Rachel had been sharing smiles with. The man was instantly recognizable from the pictures on her phone. The way she leaned towards him, their casual touches at the table, it all confirmed his fears. Inside, John grappled with a whirlwind of emotions that overwhelmed him. The love he harbored for Rachel metamorphosed into something sinister, into an agony he couldn't put into words. Betrayed, humiliated, he stood rooted, mute witness to the scene he had never envisioned himself partaking in. They laughed, unfettered, oblivious of the world around them, a world that, for Rachel, perhaps truly didn't exist. She fashioned a fresh existence, devoid of John, and within him swelled anger, mingled with an odd sense of tranquility. He stood there, observing everything unfold. No longer were there questions, no more space for speculation. The betrayal was evident, as clear as the restaurant lights mirrored in the windows. He sensed the instant his entire being transformed, when the man who chased Rachel in that car vanished, replaced by one who knew precisely what actions were required. Dinner persisted, and with each smile, each gentle gesture, John felt more distant from the woman he used to be close to. Their shared life now appeared a malicious facade, leaving him merely an observer. The divorce notice lay in wait, poised for its opportune moment. Unaware, she hadn't yet realized that the end was nearer than she could ever have imagined. The waiter emerged with a bottle of wine, something John had arranged over the phone, anticipating this very instant. Unaware of what lay ahead, Rachel smiled at the waiter, assuming it was another unexpected move by the man before her. Grasping the envelope with a sure smile, her face transformed into one of puzzlement and fear as she scanned the initial lines. John, distant yet pulse-quickening, watched as Rachel scrutinized the document. Her complexion paled, her hands trembled slightly. Trying to conceal her response, she failed to notice the man's observation. "What transpired?" he inquired, not comprehending the sudden shift. Yet Rachel remained silent, her lips moving but no words escaping. In the end, there was no denying it. The betrayal was evident, yet so was John's long-hidden secret. He departed, leaving behind the turmoil he had stirred up. The restaurant's ambience seemed stuck in a time loop, although life continued to revolve around it. For Rachel, everything around her faded away. In the dim glow, clinking cutlery mirroring in glasses, soft chatter echoing from afar, and the flickering candlelight all faded simultaneously as his eyes landed on the unfeeling words on the divorce notice. The paper had slipped from his trembling fingers as his mind wrestled to comprehend how they'd reached this point. She was left with just an empty void, her own labored breaths and Mark's gaze, fixed ahead, displaying confusion and worry. "Rachel, what's wrong? What's happening?" His voice broke the quiet, snapping her back to the present. She looked at him, her mouth moving silently, as if hunting for words that eluded her grasp. The letter remained there on the table, open, every word echoing her fear. John had found out. He always had. Mark, still oblivious to the severity, bent to pick up the letter. His eyes scanned the document briefly before freezing as well. Mark murmured, "It's a divorce letter," seeming more to express his thoughts than addressing Rachel. His gaze shifted towards her, disbelief etched across his face. He realized the truth. Rachel had closed her eyes, as if wishing away their predicament. But Mark's words echoed in John's mind. Yes, he was aware of the infidelity. There had been no heated arguments or accusations, only silence. Now the truth lay exposed, crushing them with a force that nearly stole John's breath. Mark continued to grapple with the gravity of the situation, running his fingers through his hair in distress. "Everything changes now," he whispered, his voice quivering slightly. "You said you were dissatisfied, that he no longer cared. But he had known all along, Rachel. What are we going to do?" Rachel managed a response, yet her words lacked strength, barely audible. I don't know." A palpable discomfort filled the air. They were no longer the masters of their own fate. The power, once thought to be Rachel's, now fully belonged to John, causing her despair to intensify. The taciturn stretch between them was broken by an oblivious waiter who inquired politely, "Is everything all right here, gentlemen?" Unable to respond, Rachel remained silent as Mark nodded, implying control, yet the situation clearly was not. The waiter retreated, leaving another heavy and oppressive silence. Rachel needed clarity. She needed to comprehend how events had spiraled so swiftly and cruelly. However, when she glanced at Mark, she noticed a change. An atmosphere of tension filled the space, a distance that hadn't been there before. It was as if he was present but simultaneously absent. He appeared fidgety, on edge. Then, the truth, which Rachel had previously ignored, started to surface. "Mark," she began softly, "what are your thoughts?" He didn't answer right away, instead averting his gaze while rubbing his hands anxiously. Rachel, it seems we need a conversation. Her heart raced. In his eyes, she noticed something unfamiliar, a hint of doubt, possibly regret. Could you clarify the topic? She questioned, her voice quivering. Mark appeared to be gathering his breath, as if preparing for a challenging disclosure. I'm uncertain if this us is a good idea to pursue. Rachel felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. What do you mean? She demanded, her voice growing stronger, an edge of despair seeping in. Mark met her gaze, his expression now grave, nearly detached. I must inform you, Rachel, I am already married. These words resonated heavily with Rachel, unexpectedly knocking the wind out of her. She blinked repeatedly, struggling to comprehend what she had just learned. Married? She echoed incredulously. You didn't mention being married. Mark nodded, pressed his lips into a tight line. I kept it hidden from you. Initially, I thought it wouldn't matter. But after seeing how John handled the situation, I understand that I can't continue like this. I have a wife, a family. Rachel leaned forward, pushed against the table by the weight of the revelation. You have a wife, she repeated, feeling anger surging beneath her skin. You led me to believe I was the only person in your life, that we could build something together. How could you do that? Mark stood firm, his gaze on her, but with a cold determination in his voice. I lied, yes, but you also deceived John. We both constructed this relationship on lies. And now I see the extent of the destruction it can cause, not just for our lives, but for others who don't deserve to suffer due to our deceit. Indignation and despair intertwined in Rachel. And now you wish to return to your life as if nothing happened. Mark fell quiet for a spell, his lips pressed tight, eyes weary. I'm at a loss, Rachel. This has escalated beyond repair, and today's events have made it clear that our relationship can no longer persist. A wave of humiliation and rage surged through Rachel. It wasn't merely the deception she grappled with now, but the revelation that she had been manipulated. She forfeited her marriage, her life with John, for someone who never intended a complete commitment. With a wife, a home, something he had concealed, Mark was now poised to depart, leaving no trace behind at the brink of their imminent collapse. You can't abandon me like this, Rachel murmured, her voice quivering with emotion. You can't do this to me right now. Mark shook his head resolutely. I can't keep up a facade, Rachel. I can't cause any more destruction. Another silence descended upon them, oppressive and unyielding. Looking at the divorce notice on the table, Rachel stared at the man who had been her perceived new source of joy, now nothing but a cruel deception. Her legs trembled slightly as she stood from the table. I require time to contemplate, she said, her voice chilled and detached. Mark stayed silent, merely observing as she collected her belongings and departed from the restaurant without a glance back. Rachel hurriedly left the establishment, nearly colliding with pedestrians on the sidewalks. The chilly evening air struck her face, yet it was insufficient to quell the turmoil roiling within. With each step he took, his footsteps seemed to echo the void that now gnawed at his core. Mark's words still reverberated in his mind, weighing heavily. I am already married. These words repeated in her thoughts, searching for explanation and justification for the recent turn of events. Minutes ago, her world, seemingly stable, crumbled around her. Windows of shuttered stores gleamed under streetlights, yet Rachel saw only her own disarray. How had she let things deteriorate so severely? How could she have been so oblivious, so gullible, as to think Mark was the answer to her dilemmas? Now, aside from John's heartache, she bore the burden of deceit, used and manipulated by someone who prioritized his family life over her. The sense of betrayal intensified, not just toward John, but also Mark, who betrayed her confidence. Alone, she was ensnared in a tapestry of deception she had assisted in crafting. The ethical quandary was oppressive. On one side, she acknowledged the transgression of her marriage vows, betraying the man who, inexplicably, still appeared to cherish her. On the other, she was grappling with the reality of her own complicity. In one instance, she had been deceived by someone who symbolized her aspiration for a fresh life and altered destiny. As she ceased her stride, she recognized she was outside the building where she resided with John. She gazed upward at their apartment window, its darkness suggesting that John likely wasn't home. For an instant, she wrestled with the urge to return, to step inside and attempt an explanation, to plead for forgiveness and a fresh opportunity. However, simultaneously, she knew it might be too late for that. The harm had already been inflicted. The harsh words of the divorce decree continued to echo in her mind, a sour reminder of John's resolve. Rachel stood before the building's entrance, hesitant, her heart burdened. She acknowledged she must confront her actions, yet the dread of rejection, of not being absolved, immobilized her. Her hand lingered over the doorknob for several seconds before making a decision to enter. The lobby was vacant. A heavy silence echoed around her, making every footstep sound loud and ominous. The elevator climbed at a snail's pace. With each floor passed, her apprehension grew. What words could she utter to John? Had they said all there was left to say? As the elevator door slid open, she proceeded down the corridor, each step feeling heavier than the previous one. Upon reaching John's apartment door, she hesitated once more. Could it be that he no longer desired her presence? Perhaps he had already taken steps to erase her from his life. This thought weighed heavily on her, yet she knew she must confront the repercussions of her decisions. When she pushed open the apartment door, silence met her like a cold wave. The lights were off, and there was no trace of John. The room was spotless, immaculate, as if he hadn't returned home since their silent altercation in the restaurant. Will remained motionless for a few moments, her eyes sweeping over familiar surroundings, now feeling foreign and distant. The shared house felt alien to her now. She moved towards the couch and let her accumulated feelings take their toll. Suppressed tears from the night surfaced silently as she quivered under the weight of all that had transpired. Regret weighed heavily, accompanied by a profound feeling of impotence. There was no escape from the past. Her decisions from recent months had brought her to this point, and now she needed to confront the repercussions. The apartment door softly creaked open, and Rachel, without looking, knew it was John. A heartbeat skipped as she rose, turning to face him. His gaze was composed, but there was an icy presence that had never been there before. He stepped quietly into the room, unspoken words hanging in the air, his eyes locked on hers. "John," Rachel attempted, her voice fading away. She found herself at a loss for words, unsure of how to begin. He scrutinized her in silence for a while before speaking, his tone steady and composed. "Did you read the letter?" Rachel nodded, a lump rising in her throat. "It's Lee." "There's no need for an explanation," John said, his calmness making her even more uneasy. "I already know everything." His words struck her like a blow. There was nowhere left to hide, no room for excuses or justifications. He knew. "I always suspected." John approached the coffee table and laid the keys on it, the sound reverberating in the quiet room. "Why, Rachel?" she asked. "I need an answer." She hesitated, struggling to find the words. How can I explain the unexplainable? How can one justify betraying the man who stood by their side, who gave them everything? "I assumed as much," he replied, his voice filled with disbelief. "Why did you do this?" she inquired again, her voice fragile. "I was unhappy." "I thought so," he said, incredulity evident in his tone. "And the remedy for unhappiness was to search for another? Haven't you considered we could resolve this as a team?" Rachel couldn't lift her eyes to meet John's. "I was perplexed. Our relationship wasn't the same as it used to be." John let out a sigh, raking his fingers through his hair in an expression of exasperation. "Things evolve, Rachel. That's part of being married. Yet, what you did—" He left the statement hanging in the air, letting the tension fill the room. Rachel could feel her body tremble beneath John's disapproval. She knew she had erred, but didn't know how to mend what she had shattered. In the end, John turned and walked towards the door. For a brief moment, he paused without turning back. "I'm going away for a few days. I need space to ponder." Rachel moved forward, gripped by desperation. "John, wait." "Not at this time," he replied decisively. "Perhaps I can find it within myself to forgive you eventually, but not at the moment. I simply must keep my distance." And with those words, he departed, leaving Rachel in solitude, enveloped by silence and guilt. The vacuum left when he shut the door echoed harshly. She recognized this marked the start of something beyond her grasp, a wound perhaps irreparable. The quiet in Rachel and John's residence loomed heavily, interrupted only by the clocks ticking on the wall. For days following, Rachel found herself engulfed in an emotional lethargy, preoccupied solely with John's parting words. He had vanished without a promise of return, without even a glimmer of potential reconciliation. The ambience that once comforted her as home now constricted, swarming with recollections of a love she had shattered. She endeavored to immerse herself in routine tasks, yet nothing alleviated the ever-present unease. Her mind, ensnared by anticipation, oscillated between remorse and despair. Rachel acknowledged her infidelity as the precipice, but the emptiness left by John was unendurable. She viewed him as more than just a spouse, he was her confidant, her sanctuary. Yet here she stood, solitary and confronting the repercussions of her decisions. On an afternoon that followed days of quiet, Rachel received a message. Mark's name flashed up, and a sense of dread filled her heart. For a brief moment, she debated ignoring him, but she recognized she required answers. Upon reading his message, what he wrote caused his stomach to churn. Mark disclosed that his wife had uncovered their secrets. A marriage she considered remote and insignificant was now teetering on the edge of ruin. He accused her. It seemed that much of what transpired was somehow a result of Rachel's decisions. His words were icy and calculated, tinged with an anger she hadn't anticipated. The man she sought solace in was now abandoning her, shifting the blame to alleviate his own guilt as he grappled with the impending collapse of his life. Rachel shut her phone, the gravity of her actions pressing heavily upon her in an unfamiliar manner. She saw no way out. Not only had she dismantled her own marriage, but also contributed to the collapse of another family's harmony. The sensation of loneliness grew unbearable. All that remained was acceptance of the truth. She had deceived everyone around her, most of all herself. Meanwhile, John sought solace at an old friend's residence. Long nights filled with conflicting emotions ensued as he oscillated between fury and sorrow, recalling the life they shared and the betrayal she inflicted upon him. The mental image of Rachel with another man, the lie she had perpetrated for months, haunted him. He wandered the city, hoping to find clarity, yet only finding more questions. A fragment within him yearned for forgiveness. Some part of him still cherished her, some part that sought a path back. Yet another aspect, the more resolute one, acknowledged he could no longer gaze at her in the same manner. The act of betrayal had restructured everything. John understood that even if he pardoned them, they would no longer be the pair they once were. In a lucid moment, he decided he required personal resolution. I couldn't progress with my life without a final dialogue. He needed to express his feelings to Rachel, yearned for her apology, despite the lack of potential reconciliation. Upon his return to the apartment, Rachel sat on the couch, her face drained and weary. Her gaze met John's, and the ensuing silence felt dense enough to touch. "John," Rachel started, her voice frail and uncertain. "You don't have to speak," he interjected, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "I came here to convey that to you. I loved you, Rachel, truly, and maybe a part of me still does. But what you did, I can't continue like this anymore." Tears filled Rachel's eyes. She yearned to plead for another opportunity, but she acknowledged it was already past due. The harm had been inflicted. John persisted, his tone resolute yet tinged with anguish. "I'm not here to quarrel or level charges. I merely needed to express this. I needed to see you one last time and conclude things correctly. Please, John." Her words faltered, but he said it regardless. "I forgive you," he stated unexpectedly. "Yet, such forgiveness won't restore us. It's the kind of forgiveness that enables me to proceed, that allows me to liberate myself from all this." Rachel began to weep uncontrollably, yet John stayed resolute. He had already made his decision. Without a backward glance, he gathered his belongings and departed the apartment for the final time. It was over, and for both, the acknowledgement that they would never be the same again. In contrast, Mark experienced his life shatter in a harsher manner. Upon uncovering his deceit, she expelled him from their home and initiated a harsh divorce proceeding, aiming for sole custody of their children and his assets. He was left with nothing, confined to a small, chilly flat, once the domain of the self-assured man who treated Rachel as a pastime. Simultaneously, Rachel found herself grappling with her solitude. With John gone, Mark absent, and her honor tarnished, she had to face the emptiness she had fostered. Nights grew prolonged, her former home now merely an acoustic reminder of everything she had forfeited. For all three, there was no going back. Our tale concludes here. Please share your thoughts below. We're curious about your opinions on this conclusion. Don't forget to subscribe for more narratives like this, where we delve into the repercussions of life's decisions. And keep in mind, this channel condemns any form of betrayal. Dishonesty ruins lives, connections, and households. See you later.